Alright, looks like we got ourselves a AR10 with a strike eagle on top. Strike eagle is amazing. Anyways, how this is going to work to take it apart: safety's on, bolts locked open, no mag. We're going to release our bolt. That's going to drop it. 2 pins are located on the left hand side. Generally you should be able to push them. If not, we can run a pen or a tip of a bullet or your punch, whatever, and that'll push them through. Come on the other side and you can pull them until they stop. They won't come out, they're going to stay, they're contained. There's a detent, and then we can separate the upper from our lower. When we're going to be cleaning this thing, what we'll generally do is we don't need to mess with the trigger area. You can use brushes. You can come in, brush it out, air, blow it out. If you really want to, we can push our pins and we can actually remove everything. That'll be a separate video on how to remove your trigger assembly. But tip of a pen, a punch, a screwdriver, your finger, anything will work to push this detent down. You can push in on your buffer, and this might be too pointy, but we'll pull out our spring and our buffer. Our buffer we were able to recover. They're not contained. Some you'll find there's a silent capture where it's all contained, but for the most part you're going to find a spring and a weighted buffer in the tube. But by removing that, you can clean out any gunk. On this, we're definitely going to want to lubricate it just a little, because if it's brand new, it might have a little graphite on it, but generally they're dry. You hear them scrunch in there. We're just going to make it a little easier to charge it. But what we would do is clean out everything. This one's really clean on the trigger area here. But we can grab our lube and we can pour some into the hand, and we're gonna run it around our spring. Just give it a light little coat. You don't need a ton of lube, you don't need to pour it in there, but it will help our spring out just a little when we go to charge the gun, and when it's shooting, that it's got just a little bit to glide on. So once we feel that we've got a decent little coating around our spring and our buffer, I just got some on the hands, so we're gonna run it around. We'll then insert our buffer into the spring. When you go to reinsert your spring into the buffer tube, you don't usually need to push down on your detent. You're just going to start your spring over the top, push it in until it stops. You don't need to orient it. Those little lines on the side of their buffer, those are designed for any material or water or liquid or anything that gets in to be able to pass around it, and then it's not going to push all that back into the gun. It can actually run water out the back. There's a hole in our tube. If you're ever wanting to remove your stock, these old standard ones, if you pinch it, you can adjust where we're at, but if you want to remove it, you pull down and it's going to clear. There's a little screw in there that will clear. That's what catches it. We've got a screw in the bottom here that retracts when we flex down. But going to put it back on, same procedure. Just slide it over the end. We're gonna flex it down so we can stretch it over. Move it out of the camera view here. Usually not a ton of force. And anytime you're disassembling these, you shouldn't have to force anything. So if you're forcing something, you might be doing it wrong, and we want to double check. When we go to work on our upper, all we'll need to do is pull our charging handle, which is going to remove our bolt and charging handle. One thing to keep in mind with our charging handle is how it goes into the upper receiver here. So this is called the upper receiver, barrel, handguard assembly, and obviously optic. It's going to be our bolt carrier group, charging handle. You'll notice it's got two little nubs on the side here. What they do is if we were to slide it straight in the back, if we were to insert this straight in the back, those nubs are going to catch it. So roughly about an inch or so in, there's a track. If we go right in the back of our receiver and drag it backwards, you'll feel it catch into place. That's the track that your charging handle runs. When we go to reinsert, you'll also want to be able to not pull it out too far because it slips out, but not push it in too far because you won't be able to get your bolt carrier group in. So we leave it out just a little bit. That way when your bolt reinserts, you can extend it, get your gas key, and it'll slide right into place. So in this case, we've got these guys out. Then what we would want to do is, we found makeup wedges work the best. You dip it in some hoppies and you're going to wipe out your upper receiver. A bore snake, or you can run patches through a rod, are going to go through your barrel, through your breech back here, and you'll pull them out down at the end here. We're not going to be cleaning this one right now today, but when we go to reassemble, a little bit of lube on the outside of our charging handle is going to greatly increase the ease of operating it. So we spread lubrication on it. CLP is the best. Find our track and get that in place. Our bolt carrier group, we're going to disassemble this in a moment. Actually, we'll do that right now. Our bolt carrier group is relatively easy, and there's a little cotter pin here. Sometimes on your AR10 you'll find it's more of a pin rather than a cotter pin, but we remove the cotter pin, then turn the bolt upright, it'll remove our firing pin. Some AR10s, they'll put a spring around it, some won't, so don't be surprised if yours does not. Then our cam pin shakes right out the top here, there's a hole through it, and our bolt will pull straight out the front. How this thing usually operates is our cam pin goes in, the firing pin is in here, and then your cotter pin is riding back here, so it holds your firing pin from falling out, which everything else is held in against it then. So it's kind of a cool little feature. It's technically a piston, but it's otherwise known as direct impingement. A piston gun, we generally see the bolt carrier turning into a giant piston. We're going to clean this, lubricate it. We've disassembled our example of how those function, but we're all out of makeup wedges. We're just going to use a cloth and we're going to wipe this down with Hoppies. Does a good job at taking apart the carbon. Real Ovid is a great little company that makes a carbon scraper for bolts. They've got AR specific, gun specific things. And they've got a scraper because you will build up a lot of carbon on the back of your bolt. It does amazing at taking that stuff off if you've let it build up, because that is one spot you get a lot of heat, a lot of carbon. It travels back through your gas tube and roasts it. But Hoppies is doing a good job because there have not been a lot of rounds through. But back to our reassembly here. Spring. When we go to apply our lube, we'll just put a little bit onto our bolt carrier, or our bolt. We just want a light surface because metal, we're rubbing on metal. We're going to insert, well, first, on our actual bolt face, there are 8 lugs. One is shorter. This is your extractor. This is what's going to grip on the back of the bullet. There's 7 of them that are the same length, and your 8th is shorter. That guy, when it grips onto a bullet, it becomes the same length as all of these. And if it were the same length as they are now, your lugs, it may have some feeding issues. It wouldn't fit, or they'd have to make it a little different. So when you go to insert into your bolt carrier, it doesn't matter what way it goes. You start with your extractor pointing straight up, and you're going to rotate 1 to left. Then when you look into your cam pin hole here, you'll see that that's where your cam is going to go. And certain bolts are tapered where they won't accept it. If you were to, say, have your extractor pointed down on the other end, it wouldn't take the cam. But occasionally it does happen, and you have people that bring in their gun that it's not extracting because, whoops, they had put it in backwards. Then you usually cup around, and we're going to drop our, I'll start a little spring there. We're just going to guide our spring in. When it's in place, to tell if it's going to be able to punch through, if you put pressure on the back and see it protruding through the bolt face, you know that you've done it right and it's in as far as it can go. This one, since it's got a spring on the back, we're going to help it by putting a little pressure and sliding our pin in. If you find when you insert your cotter pin that it's not going all the way, as you're looking straight across this, and if you're pushing it in, pushing your cotter pin in, you do force, not hard, but you're going to come in and at an angle down, so you're kind of putting pressure down at a diagonal angle. That'll usually bend it enough so it'll catch on the other side here. Then to tell if you're lubricated enough, a simple flick of the bolt carrier, if your bolt pops out, you know you've lubricated it properly. Another thing to tell, which we didn't look at when we had the bolt out, were the gas rings on the back. If it can handle its own weight, then your gas rings are pretty good. If you find when you set your bolt carrier down that it immediately drops, you might want to look at your gas rings and replace them. They're really cheap. gas key, you never ever ever want to loosen these, because the minute you the minute you loosen these screws or take it apart to clean it, you're gonna find that you're not gonna cycle. When the gun shoots and the gas comes through our gas key, it comes in and it's gonna unlock our bolt by pushing the bolt carrier back to extend where your lugs turn and will pass through your star chamber at the back of our barrel. If it can't blow through to do that because this has become loose, then it's not going to unlock it and you're going to bang and it's going to stay there. So it's not going to have enough gas. The holes here bleed off any excess gas, which there's usually a lot of, but don't loosen these. You can stick pipe cleaners in here if you really need to clean it, but for the most part the gun is so over-gassed there's not much of a need to. But now we put a little layer of CLP on the outside of our bolt. These notches are here because we've got a forward assist, and I'll show you the forward assist in a minute. But we just make sure that we've got that thin layer of CLP around the whole thing. Then we're going to return to our upper, and when we insert our upper, or our bolt into our upper, we want to make sure, like we were saying before, that our bolt is extended. Our charging handle's about halfway out. We'll line up our gas key into our charging handle and insert them both. Then, if we pick up the receiver, this may fall out, but it's in place. So we're all good. So we've gone through taking out our bolt, charging handle, cleaning it, cleaned up our lower and our buffer tube, spring and buffer. We'll do another video that shows how to disassemble triggers and all that, but that's our basic field strip disassembly of what we'd need to do for regular maintenance and cleaning on our AR10 or AR15. They're all roughly the same, just one's bigger than the other. Then put the upper onto the lower and we'll push our rear pin. That'll hold it, and then we can push our front pin. All that's left now is to function test. Everything made the sound it should and did what it needed to do. We're good to go.